Hey guys, Andrew Esquivel here, back with another review, and today I'm going to be reviewing the CougarMotor v16 Turbo LED conversion kit to convert your halogen headlights into LEDs. Now first off, let's go over the specs. We're once again working with the infamous 9007 series socket, which is known for having compatibility issues with aftermarket products. We'll go over that in just a moment. These units put out a color temperature of 6,000 Kelvin. They produce a total of 7,200 lumens, pull a total of 80 watts, have an estimated lifespan of about 50,000 hours, although depending on where you look, whether it's on the Amazon webpage or the box, the number of hours estimated varies for some reason. And it has a 3-year warranty. So, now that we got that out of the way, let's actually talk about the product itself. Now, we were talking about compatibility issues. Let's go over that. So, with a normal pair of halogen headlights, you would first plug the headlight in to the socket inside of your headlight reflector unit, and then you would put the circular retainer lock in to lock the bulb in place so it doesn't fall out or move. And then after that, you would plug the power directly into the bulb, and that would be the steps you would do. But with all LEDs that have a heat sink, we run into an issue. And we can't do it in that particular order because the heatsink prevents us from putting the retainer lock over so that it can lock the bulb into place. Now, normally, LED manufacturers realize this and they devise a clever method for removing the gasket so that you can get the retainer lock into place. I have been trying for the past half an hour to figure out some sort of way to remove the gasket so that I can get the retainer lock in place, because it is important that we use it. I can't figure it out in terms of an easy way. Normally there's a twist lock mechanism and you would push it upwards. In this case, it seems that they've done something to prevent you from doing that. In one case with a different LED that I tried, there was an issue where they epoxied the gasket into place, which that's not the case with this one. Here's what I think what they did. When assembling this bulb, they first put the gasket in and it hits a part where it can't move up anymore. Then they put the heatsink in and screwed it into place. Then they put the fan in, and then they put the bottom plate in, which means in order to remove the gaskets, we would have to disassemble the entire lower body here. And that means opening up the unit here with all these little screws and doing all that just so we can get the circular retainer lock in. Now here's the thing, even if we were to do all of that, the retainer lock is going to need to be modified as well. You see, with a normal retainer lock, in my case with a 2003 Mitsubishi Outlander LS, these parts right here are normally raised up a few millimeters, and that's enough of an issue to where there's too much, or there's not enough distance between the heatsink and the gasket to fit, so we have to shave it down so that it can fit, which that is necessary with this case too. Now, I haven't taken the bulb apart because, once again, that would mean that this is not actually a plug-and-play unit, and doing so would probably void any warranty that you have, especially if you screw something up. So, if you're willing to take it apart, you can probably fit the gasket around and lock it into place, and you'd be good. But there is another way to go about it. It's a little bit of a more modification for your car, but I have a backup system for cases like this. And it involves you cutting the retainer lock into, well, a 2/3 of a ring and 1/3 of a ring. And this will allow you to get it over the bulb. So this is what it would look like if you put the 2/3 portion on it. And it would snap into place. And this might actually be enough right here to hold it in. You might not need all 3 points to lock it in, because the gasket does do some of that for you. But we also have the last 1/3 portion if you wanted to lock it into place. So the last 1/3 would just go right here in between the heatsink and whatnot. But let me show you what this actually looks like here, since we got a cutoff view. So right here is where you'll see we have the plastic in between the heatsink and the gasket. Now, the problem with modifying your circular retainer lock like this is there's a point of no return. Once you do this, you're stuck with, well, a modified retainer lock. And that's a problem, because in cases like mine, since I have a Mitsubishi Outlander, finding replacements of these circular retainer locks, I know for a fact, are next to impossible unless you're willing to pay out the nose from the dealer or willing to go to a junkyard where they might have it if it's not already stripped away. It was very hard to come across a few of these, and it took me a few days at a few different junkyards to find this particular part so that I can illustrate these points for you. I have several different types of modified retainers and standard ones. So this is kind of a problem when you think about it, because, well, it's not plug and play anymore, and now you got to be really careful about how you go about it. I used a jigsaw to cut through, and that's why I got nice straight lines there. But now that we have some sort of method to hold them in place, we got to see how well it performs. Now, looking at the design here, it looks a lot like many other designs I have been working with recently, where the top two diodes have like a half circular, like a half ball sort of reflector to aim it and directionalize it, while the bottom two don't. Now, this particular headlight claims to use arc beam technology, which not all the bulbs use arc beam technology. I don't know how well that's really going to work. I don't know if this is going to be any better than any of the other designs that I've been working with that use this particular concept. But we're sure as heck going to try. So at least we can get the retainer lock on somehow, and we're just going to, well, do our best to see how well they work. So let's go ahead and install it. So here we're at my 2003 Mitsubishi Outlander LS, and right here is the socket in which we're going to plug the headlight into. Now, it shouldn't be too hard. All we got to do is get the bulb in, and I'm going to put the bulb in downward. I've got to get the gasket in first. Alright, so after just a few more minutes of fiditling, I was able to get the gasket in as well as the circular retainer lock, but only 2/3 of it. I don't think I'm going to be able to get that last third in. So this will just have to do. Let's kind of give it a quick tug here. It's in place. It's not going anywhere. Alright, so all we got to do now is find the factory wiring harness connection and plug up the bulb directly into it, and we should now have power. So I'm going to do this with the other side, and let's go ahead and take a look at how well it works. Okay, so we are outside, and we're taking a look at the beam pattern here in my garage door, and the best I can say is it's slightly scattered and slightly patchy in some areas. Now this is the low beams. If we go over to the high beams, everything's a heck of a lot better. Right down the center is really bright, which is what you'd want to see with high beams. So going back and forth between the two, and I know my camera is a pain in the butt when it comes to focusing, but you know, so far this seems maybe-ish. Let's go ahead and go on the road and see what it feels like in our usual route. Alright, so we are here on the road. This is the usual path we take with every single LED that I test. Only lit up barely by some street lights. And looking down the road here, I would say it's kind of scattered, unfortunately, which was really a bummer. Scattered beams are worse than patchy, so usability is a bit dangerous.
But that's low beams. Let's turn on high beams. High beams are wonderful. High beams, we get a decent distance, actually. The high beams are showing, yeah, pretty far down the road. I'd say maybe 50, 60 feet almost, which is probably one of the better high beams I've seen. So let's go ahead and drive around and kind of gauge in the real world how this all affects everything. So we're going to drive once again to an area of this neighborhood where it is completely dark and there's no assisted light from any street lights whatsoever. And this is the low beams. Going over to high beams. The high beams are very nice. The high beams, there's a slight patchiness if you really look hard, but it's not something I would say would interfere with your ability to drive. High beam throw distance is decent. Usable light is actually relatively far compared to some of the other bulbs of this design. So we are about to come up to the section, so I'm going to go back to low beams, and just the low beams are just, you can see on the video feed, the right side is goes a lot farther than the left side. And we are at the spot where it's going to be no lights, and the low beams, we got a train today. And okay, completely dark. This is the low beams, okay? You can tell it's not diffused. It's not patchy, it's pretty scattered. That's not good. I wouldn't consider this safe to use. I would say this is a definite fail. But if we go to high beams, the high beams are very directionalized, directly down the road here, and the high beams are actually pretty good. So let's kind of just drive around, and we're going to switch off between the two. So low beam, high beam, low beam. I really don't even feel comfortable driving with the low beam because you can't see much in front of you at all. The usable distance is just maybe like 10 feet. So go back to high beam, and it's good. Now this is the problem I see with this design, because the top two diodes on the bulbs have these reflectors, and generally those top two diodes are the high beams. And the low beams are just using the reflectors inside of the housing unit where the bulbs go in. And the housing units are all different, so you need to adjust. But because of the way the reflectors work, if you adjust for low beam, you screw up the high beam, and if you adjust for high beam, you screw up the low beam. And that's a problem. Every time, you know, we see this design, we see the same or similar issues. So we are going to turn on the street that we always turn on. Got another car coming in front of us here. Before I turn on beams and whatnot, I'm going to get past them just as a courtesy. Alright. Now this is high beams again. High beams, really good, but that's because they're using the reflectors on the lights themselves to be directionalized. I keep saying to myself, why don't they put the low beams in a directionalized sense as well, and have it so that when you're on high beams, it just uses the top and bottom diodes at the same time. That to me would seem like a perfect idea, because you want directionalized light. Go back to low beams, high beams, low, high. You know, it kind of boggles my mind. Everyone seems to be going with this particular design, and they're not seeing the terrible flaw. Every time you see a picture on the internet, they're showing you the high beams. They don't show you the low beams in any of the pictures on Amazon. And I suspect it's because they realize the low beams are terrible. So, you know, there's some lights that do use this design, and they do it really well. There was one from, I believe, AutoVision that did an incredible job at diffusion, and the light was so perfectly diffused on the low and high beams. But the problem with the AutoVisions is the glass housing they were in broke all the time, and it was just not bright enough and not directionalized enough to be better than halogens. So we see this all the time. LEDs try to mimic halogens, but they can't do it. They just can't do it. And when you have a halogen-style headlamp, you know, it's designed for the way a halogen works, and LEDs just have not caught up in design and engineering to mimic all of that just right. So we go back to low beams, it's scattered like crazy, and high beams are patchy. So I cannot recommend this bulb. This bulb has too many issues. You can't put the circular retainer lock on it without serious modification to either the bulb or the retainer lock. The beams on low beams are terrible throw distance and are scattered like crazy. The high beams are decent, but they're still patchy. Overall, I wouldn't say this is worth your money or your time at all. I'm very disappointed in these bulbs. For something that, you know, they're saying they're using arc beam technology for perfect diffusion, it's just not there. There's just no way. So with that being said, guys, I hope you found this informative. Please comment, rate, subscribe, show your friends, check out my other videos. I got plenty of them. I do reviews on LED headlights pretty often nowadays because I'm still in search of the perfect headlight. And as always, I'll see you next time, and please drive safe, have a good day, or night, whichever it may be.